Windows 11 has a feature called Windows Recall. It makes a screen recording of your computer screen and is analyzed. Passwords, names, addresses, locations, payment information, photos, website you visited, including the hub, everything, literally everything that is shown on your screen gets captured and stored on your computer. This data is analyzed by AI, which I will circle back to in a minute. So it knows what it sees on the screen, so you are able to search for that. What was the name of that website that I visited last week with the information about the Eiffel Tower, for example? The problem, however, is there is no such thing as safe AI. That simply hasn't been invented yet. The fact that Recall even exists and is installed on every single Windows computer on the planet is extremely dangerous. Every single computer means also hospitals and mental institutions dealing with confidential patient records, screen recorded. Abortion clinics, for example, screen recorded. Judges and lawyers deciding on people's future, screen recorded. Nuclear power plants, screen recorded. High-ranking government officials that decide to go to war or not, well, screen recorded. Imagine how much that data, everything of everyone, would be worth to advertisers, or even on the black market, or criminals, or the government, or a foreign government. And if that wasn't bad enough, when Microsoft introduced it, it didn't bother to encrypt the database which all the information was stored in, so it got hacked. Microsoft released a new version months later and told the public it was now safe, and then
Windows Recall was cracked again. Nice. Security researcher Alex Haganah, or Zytax, their most recent dive into testing Recall's vulnerabilities led to an update to Total Recall, the extraction tool that Alex developed to find the initial vulnerabilities back in 2024 that exposed everything being stored in an unencrypted SQLite database.
Microsoft claims that you can switch off Recall in the Windows settings. However, it is still active in memory. Only the UI is disabled. In other words, it is still recording, but it isn't saved to disk. And there are very technical guides on the internet out there, like this for example, on how to stop this. However, Microsoft is very famous for enabling things in Windows updates when you have disabled it. But even if you can really turn it off, it is still an unacceptable security risk, because the difference between off and on is 1 bit in memory. When it's 0, it's off. When it's 1, it's on. Malicious actors can easily switch this off or on with a piece of software, or an unpatched vulnerability in Chrome, for example, when you visit a malicious website. It can be done by literally any computer program that you've installed on your computer. But also a bad Windows update can do the trick. Another problem is, while you can switch it off, you cannot uninstall it. This is basically spyware that is installed on every single Windows computer. This is an accident waiting to happen. Recall is your privacy's worst nightmare and a scammer's wet dream. After the second hack, which I talked about before, a security researcher reported to Microsoft that it was still unsafe. And Microsoft claimed that it was a feature, not a bug. So the security researcher released a tool that could ride along with Recall to recall the computer's entire history. Now everybody can enjoy everyone's computer history. And when an Indian scammer can tell your mom to install TeamViewer, they can get her to install a virus scanner that in reality sends all the data of Recall to the scammer, which contains banking information or compromising material to extort someone. So my biggest question is, why isn't Recall an optional program that you can install from the App Store? Why does it need to be installed on every single Windows computer on the planet and running in memory? And while Microsoft claims that your data is stored locally on your computer, they have never said that Microsoft can't access that data remotely. Microsoft would make way more money if they can sell this data to advertisers. And I would love for some EU lawyers to look into this, because I think there might be a possible violation of the GDPR here. And because of how invasive and tone deaf Microsoft is around Recall, I looked up the definition of stalking on Wikipedia and oh boy. Microsoft is really adamant that you need an online account for Windows. There is no technical reason why this is necessary because a local account worked fine since 1995 with Windows 95. Microsoft could have given users an option during installation, a local account or an online account. And even worse, they are bending over backwards to disable methods circumventing making an online account. It has become a cat and mouse game. Someone finds a workaround, Microsoft patches it. Someone finds a workaround, Microsoft patches it. And Microsoft is not alone in this endeavor because the same applies to Apple and Google with Android. They forced online accounts years ago onto users. So why are companies so adamant that you create an online account? Well, the reason is twofold. The first one is control. It allows them to refuse access to your own machine you bought if they or the government wants to. And the second reason is data. Microsoft can sell your data for ads, so data brokers can make ads tailored to you. But data is also very useful for governments when your vision does not exactly align with theirs. Microsoft is heavily pushing users to encrypt the data on their SSD in the Pro version of Windows, not the Home version. This is called BITLOCKER, which is enabled by default. Luckily, when you install it, you can switch it off. Without the encryption key, you can't access your own data. And who has the key to unlock your data? Indeed, Microsoft with their Microsoft account. And they can refuse access to your account and thus your computer any time of the day, or give the encryption keys to a third party like the government. Why is this so important? Well, when your Windows crashes, you sometimes need those keys stored in your Microsoft account. Right now that's free, but for how long? Microsoft would leave money on the table if they wouldn't do so, which would make investors very unhappy. And if that would happen, BitLocker basically becomes ransomware. We encrypt your computer, but for a fee you can decrypt it. The whole transition from Windows 10 to 11 didn't sit right with me. Not only did Microsoft create a huge pile of e-waste of computers that were perfectly fine, the obsolescence was 100% manufactured. But there was no reason to upgrade for the user. I, like millions of others, bought a new laptop because the old one was insufficient according to Microsoft. I upgraded my desktop computer because I was forced to upgrade in October 2025. But Windows 11 is worse by every single metric. Windows 11 wasn't an upgrade, it was a downgrade. And that's not hyperbole, because frame rates in games are consistently higher in Windows 10 than in Windows 11 with exactly the same hardware. When I plug in a new printer on Windows 10, it is recognized and you can print within 10 seconds. In Windows 11 that sometimes still works, but more often than not you need to manually select a printer driver from a giant list of drivers like it's 1995. Or even worse, navigate to the website of the manufacturer to download the driver. And even that doesn't always work. Older printers under Windows 11? Forget it. Literally the only thing that was improved in Windows 11 was security. Your computer needed to have a TPM chip for Windows 11, the Trusted Platform module. It is now possible to store encryption keys on the TPM chip. This enables secure boot, which prevents attacks. That's the official messaging. They conveniently left out that this is a very uncommon attack of which you need to have physical access to your computer. But the unofficial reason that the TPM chip was so important because it stores the encryption keys for your BitLocker, the encryption technology that Microsoft can use to lock you out of your own computer remotely. So According to Microsoft, the lack of TPM chip is a security risk for a very uncommon attack method, but the spyware recall installed on every single computer, which can be remotely accessed via the internet, that can be uninstalled, is always running in memory, containing very sensitive yet encrypted data, isn't. The math ain't mathing here. Oh boy, there are now advertisements in Windows itself. Your own operating system now looks like a scam website. And this is an operating system which you bought and paid for. When you got Windows with your computer, the price of the computer license was included in the computer. The manufacturer paid for your license. So even if you didn't pay Microsoft directly, you still paid for Windows. And while you paid for the product, you still get the ads. I regularly help out a friend who owns a computer store. I was taught never to connect to the internet while installing your operating system, since not every security measure is in place yet until the installation is finished. After the installation, Windows is nice, clean and snappy, and then I connect the internet cable and within seconds the start menu is full of crap and bloat. And these ads are tailored to your needs. How do they do that? Well, by scanning your computer for your interests. So your Word document, your Excel sheets, your PDF files, and even your internet browsing history, just to name a few. I found a really interesting document on the website of Microsoft which explains which data that they use of you. This is optional data, so this isn't even the mandatory data, only the optional data that you can opt out of. This is what is standard enabled. And now look at how long this article is and how much information they collect on you. For the last hour or so, I have been plowing through this document and a couple of things stood out to me. This one, for example, the start menu and the taskbar pins. In other words, they know which applications that you have installed. So the application launch state, so how often that you use that program. But also here, whether the user clicked on, hovered over, UI controls or hotspots. But even the caret location and the position within documents. So they even know where you are in your Word documents or your video, for example. I thought that this was interesting. Pseudonymized browsing history data. Not anonymized, but pseudonymized. In other words, they still know who you are. And then when we look a little further, you can see here URLs, which may include search term and the page title, but also what you typed in the address bar and the search box. And this is the data that is collected outside of recall. The data collected is most likely sold to advertisers. This data may only be stored on Microsoft owned servers, but however, that is not a guarantee that it will stay there. Microsoft can't even secure their own servers. Again, you paid for a license and your privacy is still invaded. At least when you use a free product like Google Docs or Gmail, you know that your data gets used. That's a trade-off. When it's free, you are the product. I have software running that monitors my network traffic, and I can see that Microsoft calls home every 3 minutes. Your guess is as good as mine what Windows exactly sends to Microsoft. After the installation, you send all the information from the list I mentioned earlier, but why does it need to connect every 3 minutes? Then Microsoft actively infuses values into its own products like Office, which is corporate speak for censorship. We don't like the things you do or say on your own computer, you bought with your own money and even paid Microsoft for a license to use, so we'll censor you. And this article is interesting because it explains how Microsoft claims to combat misinformation with censorship and then censoring the word MICROSLOP on its own Discord server. AI is stuffed into every nook, cranny, crevice, orifice and hole throughout the operating system. It doesn't matter if it makes sense or not. And often it doesn't make sense. Dell admitted at CES 2026 that consumers aren't buying the AI-powered Windows PCs. Nobody asked for AI, yet Microsoft keeps doubling down by adding more and more AI. Microsoft said multiple times that they've heard user feedback and scaled down with the AI stuff, but it keeps doubling down. And on top of that, I hinted that earlier, AI is not secure. Researchers warned time and time again that you cannot trust AI and more research is needed. Yet Microsoft keeps installing it on every single computer anyway and makes sure that you cannot uninstall it. Some examples of problems with AI that we haven't fixed yet. They haven't fixed the stop button problem, so we can switch it off when things go wrong. But the AI doesn't want to be shut off, so it will do everything in its power to prevent that from happening, including blackmail and even murder. They still haven't fixed hallucinations, and researchers have admitted that they can't fix it. They still haven't fixed data poisoning, which for example allows a denial of service attack, which basically means making your computer unusable. But there are tons and tons of others. I'll link a top 10 by OWASP security software in the description below. AI is a black box. We don't have precise control over it. XAI was in Dutch court in 2026 over Grok generating nude pictures of persons without consent, even minors. XAI admitted in court that it was technologically impossible to stop Grok from generating nudes. And Tesla can't stop causing lethal accidents with their self-driving cars. And AI has proven to wipe hard drives before. And the worst part is Microsoft knows that the quality of their AI is bad. That's why they advise everybody not to use it, because it's for entertainment purposes only. Another problem with AI is privacy. The article that I showed earlier that described the data points that Microsoft sends to itself, that does not include the data that AI uses. Because the AI has unlimited access to everything on your computer. It can literally see everything and read everything with recall. And if it's processed in some way by AI, it's maybe not directly sent to Microsoft one-on-one, but it's still sent to Microsoft in another way. AI cannot keep secrets, so even when the intent of Microsoft is not malicious, it can still reveal sensitive information. And data gathered with AI is not in Microsoft's terms of service. Privacy regulations have yet to catch up with this. Windows has become an incredibly bloated mess over the years. When I look at Linux or macOS, it responds, it is snappy. If I install a Windows update on a Core i3 or Core 3 how it's called nowadays, it becomes incredibly slow and sluggish while updating. When I do the same thing on an i3 Linux laptop, it is still responsive and snappy. And I don't even notice that an update is running. And all the unnecessary AI bloat, including recall that is running in your memory that you can't switch off, makes things only worse. How is it possible that a company that runs a search engine on the internet called Bing can't make Windows Search, well, search? Windows Search can't even find the stuff when it is literally right there in the start menu, next to the search bar. They cram AI into literally everything, including recall, which allows you to search your entire history of your computer. But when you search for a file or a program in Windows Search, it can't find it. If a feature that is so basic isn't on the priority list for 10 years of a company that makes operating systems, but the TPM chip and recall is, that tells you a lot about the company's priorities. Microsoft pushes out updates to Windows every second Tuesday of the month. This is called Patch Tuesday. There are tons of issues with these Windows updates breaking your computer over the last few years. sleeping and waking issues, Outlook not starting, Notepad and Paint authentication issues, NVIDIA driver instability, crashing games, Bluetooth problems, USB devices dropping, printer drivers being automatically removed. The list is endless. Windows updates have gotten so bad that Microsoft broke even their own mandatory online account, locking users out of Teams, Edge, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And I kid you not, when I was making this video, I wanted to make a screen recording of the Windows updates, and this happened after the update. Yes, it's that time again. This is Windows. This now regularly happens when I start my computer. Luckily, this operating system isn't my daily driver anymore because I installed something better. When I help out in the computer store of my friend, I see many people coming back to the store where an update ruined their whole computer. And it's often fixed by rolling the update back, but the update will install itself again in a few days, which makes the problem come back. Often the only solution is reinstalling Windows. And you never know if this Tuesday is going to be your last Tuesday you use this computer before spending hours reinstalling it. And last year my own desktop computer suffered the same fate. After an update it didn't want to boot anymore. And I had to reinstall Windows, and I'm a music producer, which means that I have to spend hours and hours of reinstalling all the music plugins for my music production software, hunting down licenses. Some I can reinstall only a couple of amount of times, or I have to buy new ones. Each Windows install is literally costing me money. It's a nightmare. Now every time I see that Windows wants to install an update, I'm afraid my computer won't boot anymore or my printer doesn't work anymore. And I can't be the only one with the fear of updates. Microsoft has been in a very comfortable position for decades. People buy their products regardless of how bad they are, because Microsoft is synonymous with the term computer for most people. And these people blindly accept that all of these problems are just part of the deal. This is how computers roll. But that's not true. This is how Microsoft rolls. The only thing we can do to stop this madness is to vote with our wallets. This is the only language that Microsoft understands. And no, Apple won't help either, because macOS does many of the same things, albeit less obvious, less intrusive, but not less invasive. So what's left? Linux. I've switched a couple of months back, and honestly I'm super happy with my decision. And in fact this entire video was written on Linux, recorded with a teleprompter. This teleprompter that I'm looking at right now, that is connected to my Linux computer. The video was edited by DaVinci Resolve on Linux, and the thumbnail was made by Krita on Linux. And sure, Linux has its problems, but when I look at Windows 11, that has gotten so bad, and Linux has gotten so good over the last 5 to 10 years, and I'm now paying Microsoft to make my computer not work, it's actually stupidity at this point not to switch to Linux. And Linus Sebastian worded it perfectly.
Windows can be a piece of shit sometimes, and it's constantly getting worse.
It's going to get worse.
And Linux can be a piece of shit sometimes,
and it's constantly getting better.
constantly getting better.